Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and next episode of Season 2, and this one we're going to be making the Emotion Fiend. So this is another one of those cosmic horror Pokemon that we're making, and the idea is this thing just saps all emotion out of a room, or its local vicinity, making people completely docile, and then they're vulnerable enough for people to attack. We'll be putting up more information at the end of the season, all like the actual Pokemon cards and things that I've made for each of these. So starting off with the actual creation of the Pokemon. So for this one, because he's basically like a chunky, fat and quite soft-skinned, apart from a few wrinkles around the eyes. So I thought, right, we'll try air dry clay for this one, rather than the polymer, because I can smooth it out a lot more with some water or Vaseline on the sculpting tools. So starting off with a ball of tin foil, just to cut down the amount of clay using, and also making the drying a bit more even so there's no cracks around. And going in now and just shaping it up. I'm adding these sausages onto the actual lump of clay just to give it a bit more shape and changing the silhouette of the actual monster. And then going around with the shaper and starting to change things. Okay, and then I had some translucent polymer clay balls that I'd made for a previous project that didn't work out, from Fimo Transparent. So I'm using these as the eyes, and I'm trying to copy that image as best I can. So it'll have the four across the top and then that one central eye that looks at you. And I'm just adding these in and shaping around the eyes themselves just to give it a bit more texture and a bit more detail. Because there's not a lot on this thing, because it's quite just a big fat bulbous amorphous blob in effect. So just so I can add something in, and so popping all the eyes in, getting a rough idea of what I want, and then I go in with one of the clay shapers with a bit of Vaseline because it's air dry clay, and just start shifting everything around and start making details. And this process, you'll see, it changes quite a bit. And I'll go back and forth, either adding or taking away, depending on how I feel like the miniature's starting to look. Right, so I've put in two little blobs underneath for his feet, and I know that the arms I'm going to put on will be on there in a moment, and they'll be quite spindly and as if he doesn't really use them. And I'm just going in again now, putting some more detail around the eyes themselves, just because I want that to pop a bit more. And you'll notice that it's very front heavy, so I want him to have like a rather a smooth, slightly arched back, but quite a big bulbous belly, and putting a couple of big folds in, which you can see there on the miniature. And I'll be going in later on, adding some more sausages of clay and blending those in just to make him a bit chunkier. You can see here, so I've added those little spindly arms that they just make it look a bit weirder, the fact that he's got them, even though they're really thin and he doesn't really use them. And I'm just going in now with a wet finger and smoothing all the clay out and making sure that I've not left any like fingerprints or anything in there after I'm happy with the final composition of the actual clay itself. The eyes I keep changing and going back and forth and doing things too, because I'm not 100% happy with these until pretty much the end before it comes to painting.
Oh, the Emotion Fiend, also known as King of Tears and Lord of Cries. He's an horrible little bugger, this one. Absolutely vile. Usually found where there's just nothing going on, and the voidness of everything.
Right, so he's had a base coat of a PVA glue mixed with some Vallejo Dark Prussian Blue, just as a base coat to help strengthen the clay, and as that initial layer to help the rest of the paint layers to start to adhere. So I go in with a light purple, which I've just mixed Vallejo Purple and the Prussian Blue, and I'll keep upping the steps in this to add more and more highlights. And I'm just going around the main areas that will be popping out and that are on show. And then for the actual main effect, what I want is I'm stippling on with an old makeup sponge and just getting some of the lighter purple, and again progressively building these layers up just so they add more texture and more detail and a bit more depth in the actual colour. Now the image below, you can see in the corner there, it's quite strange. So it doesn't follow the normal sort of like a zenithal highlight, where if you imagine the light source is from above the miniature, So the top of the head would be all lit. It's almost as if it's lit from the front. And where the biggest bulbous parts of the belly are, that's where it goes bright to almost like a yellowy, sort of sickly offset skin tone colour from the purple. And that's something that I'll start to work on from here now with the actual paint. And I did a little bit of purple in and I'll work my way up lighter and lighter, trying to get that effect where I can. And again, sponging on just because I find that it's a nice texture and something a bit different to just painting it on with a brush. And also you can blend in a bit more, so you can put the paint on quite thick like you see here, and then I use the sponge to actually sort of blend and rub it out into the rest of the actual clay.
He's looking right gross, this one. Ugh. I mean, to be honest, Craft, I don't think we can have him around that much because, well, we're not going to feel anything.
So just going through here, stippling on this lighter purple, mixed in with that beige from Vallejo, and then occasionally going up to the beige itself on the really extreme highlights on the sort of belly bands that are on the monster. And it looks quite bright at the moment, but it'll be darkened down soon with a nice wash, and then going in with a final sponge just to make those colours pop. So he's got some red around the eyes, so I've decided just to block those in initially. It's something I'll do change later on. But you can see now I'm using the sponge, so I'm putting on a bit of paint, some of the lighter colour, and then using the sponge to blend it into each other. Just make sure that before any steps before this, the base coats for the actual skin tone had completely dried. But you can see I'm just using the sponges now just to buff. And then I realise you need to be a bit darker on the top. Initially I'm trying to copy this image as best I can, and then I buff that out as well, you can see now, into the lighter, so it'll slowly have a gradient and it'll build through.
Hey Crafty, buff's a word I've heard before, but it's not used in painting, it means like muscular, and he ain't muscular.
And then you can see here I felt like I've gone too far with the blue, so I'll start putting more of that base purple on and buffing that back through with the sponge again. And again, going back and forth, dark blue mixing with a bit of purple to the normal purple, just so you get a nice gradient all the way down. But yeah, it's quite nice, quite an interesting paint job, something a bit different. Again, like with all the projects I've done so far, when I see the final product, I am very happy with it, but there are things I'd change. With this one, I think a bit more sort of belly fat, a bit more pronounced on the actual stomach area, just so he looks a bit bigger. But quite happy with this actually in the end.
That's what this is all about, Crafty. Learning as we go. These are things you've not done before, so make sure you enjoy them. And if anyone is copying crafting and following us, folks, keep going. Stay good.
So this is after he's had a dark blue wash. It's just got into all the crevices, and then I've unfortunately lost the footage here, but what I've done is as I've put the wash on, I've sponged it, and it leaves these little air bubbles on the actual surface, and it adds a great sort of motley skin texture. And then once that's starting to dry, I'll go in now and start doing the eyes. So this sort of sickly off-white yellowy beige colour. I think yes, it's light sand from Vallejo, and just sort of blocking the eyes out with these.
Why is it always eyes that are the bits that, you know, make these things come to life? Because I've heard a human saying that the eyes are the window to the soul. I mean, what's a soul first of all, Crafty, you know what I mean?
And then going in and just adding the pupils with a bit of black. And again, I'm not too fussed if this is a gloss or a matte black, because they're going to be, we're going to be adding UV resin on top, because I want to make the eyes look even bigger than they are, which we can do with the UV resin.
I mean, because I've got loads of eyes now, does that mean I've got loads of souls? I mean, how does this work? These are the questions.
So that central eye is a lot bigger, the pupil, and I'll add a bit of red on the sides. And you can see it like there, you can see the gradient with the belly fat, how it goes from that light to dark, and it's come out quite nice actually. So now, because obviously with the others I've put that iridescent colour effects paint on the image, looks like it's got like little stars on it, almost like it's reflecting the background of space. So I decided to get some of this iridescent paint and just put a little bit on over the body, so it'll give it a gloss and a shine, but also it'll reflect colours and do like a shift if you move the miniature around. It's not a bad effect actually. It's something I'm going to play with on other projects, I think. So I've just got it lightened up around the eyes now, so it looks like the eyes are all pointing forward like they are in the picture.
Oh, it looks really bad now. Look at that. Ugh. It's like he's watching you. That's gross, that. Is that the idea you were going for, though? Because are you going to UV resin this? Because I like that. Oh, it's dead good, that.
And then the UV resin. So what I've done now is, instead of moving it across the entire eye, I'm leaving like a big ball of UV resin on the actual, just the tops of the eye themselves, where the pupil is, instantly curing, and it actually makes the eye look a lot bigger than it is. And you can see on this one, this is exactly what I've done there. So a big blob of it, moved it around just a little bit. I don't want it covering the entire eye, and then immediately going in with the UV light and then curing it. And it gives this really like cool, almost like a fisheye effect. It magnifies it quite a bit. Now I'm thinking in future what I might do is do a layer, cure it, and then put another layer on top, because I'm wondering if you can get the same effect but even more sort of magnified. It's definitely something I want to do. So that's the Immersion Fiend. You can see just as the image shifts, it starts to catch the light and some of the colours do come through. Quite happy with this one. The skin texture and the lightness to the dark purple I think's worked quite well. I think again, if maybe he was a bit fatter, a bit chunkier, it might look a bit cooler. Again, something I would change if I did it again in the future. But overall, I'm really happy with this project, and we'll see you on the next episode for the next creature.